What is up, homies? The NFL season is very quickly wrapping up, and the talk of the town right now is the MVP race. Some people think it's close, some people don't, for various reasons. But one of the things that's being talked about a lot is, should wins matter in the MVP race? And okay, if you're going to ask that question, then the real question you're asking is, how much control does a quarterback have over a win?
I'm talking to you though. You're the stats guy. Yeah, you're the stats guy, and we're the homies.
So I thought it would be useful to go back and retread over some ground that we've already covered before, but that I didn't look too in depth on this particular subtopic. So let's get into it. One side of the debate says that wins should matter. The other side of the debate says that you should pretty much discount wins because wins are a team thing, and so that shouldn't factor into whether or not somebody wins the MVP. The data, or I should say the results of the analysis that I conducted, are inconclusive. Not inconclusive. They are very middle of the road, I would say. And so it lends credence to sort of both sides of the argument. So let's get into the actual numbers. I did, as I normally do, I did game, and then I also did season. So there were several models used, all logistic or linear regression models. The most important and the one that I'll be referencing the most is a linear regression model that looked at point differential as the outcome, which is continuous, and passer rating of the home team as the, we'll talk about why I did that in a little while, as the independent variable. And it's a very simple model. And basically I was just looking at, I wasn't even looking at the results necessarily in terms of how big the effect size was. I was only looking at the results for the R squared, because what I want to know is what percentage of the variance of winning does a quarterback have control over? And you find something that's actually pretty staggering. For every extra 10 points of passer rating in a given game, you can expect 3 points additionally for your team, right? So that makes sense. You know, you go from a 90 to 100, you expect your team to score 3 more points for that game. And additionally, your odds of winning that game go up by 60%. That I've reported before, and that's not surprising. What is surprising is that the R squared value is 41%. Okay, so what is R squared? R squared means that in terms of the linear relationship between point differential and passer rating, 41% of that relationship is explained by passer rating alone. That's what it's telling you. If you look at season data in a linear regression model, and that is win percentage predicted by average team passer rating, because passer rating can be calculated on the team level as well, because all it takes is like passes, completions, touchdowns, yards. Every 10-point passer rating increase, you see an 11% increase in your winning percentage over that season. That makes sense. About 1-to-1, right? 1 point of passer rating equals 1% increase in winning percentage. That sort of tracks with the game level data that we've been looking at. And again, the R squared is very close. It's 42%. So it's like just in line. And so it sort of all paints the same picture that if you want to get at quarterback performance, it's worth about 40% of a win. And so that's a pretty staggering number. Nearly half of whether or not a team wins and how many points that team scores after you subtract off the opponent's points is determined by the quarterback. That might seem like a lot. I have a feeling that no matter what side of the argument you're on, you could actually use this to your advantage. For instance, you could say, well, we shouldn't use wins because less than half of, like, a quarterback is responsible for less than half of the story of winning. Or you could say, wow, quarterback performance is so important that it is almost half of the story of winning, controlled by one player on the field. And that both of those things are true. I would say this: you would be hard pressed to find a single variable that matters as much to winning as quarterback performance. And I just said quarterback performance, but what I actually used in the analysis was passer rating, and that's because that's what I had access to. So I'm now going to give you the limitations and tell on myself a little bit in terms of this analysis. So passer rating is not perfect. I've done a video about passer rating versus QBR versus a model that includes the individual variables. The latter was the most impressive. Passer rating was the second most. QBR I don't like. And you know, that all makes sense. So passer rating is imperfect, but in terms of a single number that tries to get at quarterback performance, I actually think it is pretty useful. And I do think it captures a great deal of what we think of as quarterback performance. Now, am I saying that you should use passer rating to evaluate especially people like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen? No. And those are the two guys that it looks like are sort of the favorites to win. No, I don't think it's capturing all of their contributions. I think that depending on your play style, it actually is more useful with some guys than other guys. But in general, I think it gives us a good idea, not a full idea, but a good idea of how important a quarterback is to winning. Because it takes into account, you know, all the basic things, attempts, completions, touchdown passes, all of those different things, yards, into account. And so I think it's fairly good. It's not weighted perfectly, and it could be improved, but it's pretty good. It's the best tool we have in terms of something that's really available to us. So that is sort of part one of this analysis. Now there's a huge caveat. There's a huge caveat to all of this, and that is I only used the home team passer rating in this analysis. The reason I did that was because it would have been a freaking headache to add the opponent's passer rating, because I'm just using data that I already have on hand. And so what I would like to do is home passer rating, and then an additional independent variable of opponent passer rating. Because you would be able to see a little bit on a more granular scale what the sort of passing battle looks like. And I imagine that model would predict a great deal of whether or not you win. But for the purposes of this analysis, it actually makes a little bit more sense maybe to go with just one quarterback. That way you can say, just based on this one person's performance, how much is it worth counting towards a win? So yeah, that's pretty much all I had for this topic. Again, I think that the results sort of sit on the fence and they say 40%, that's a lot. Although everybody already knew that quarterback was the most important position in sports, so it doesn't move the needle all that much in terms of what we already thought. And I think, like I said, again, it could be ammunition for either side depending on how you want to use it. And this is a good example of like a stat that you can sort of bastardize to fit your own needs. So yeah, use this in debates as you wish. Okay. I want to talk about one more thing. I was planning, like last week or the week before, to make a video about playoff stats and the NFL and just go through, this stuff, passer rating, go through like, does running make more difference in the playoffs? Like, do you need to have a stronger run game? Does kicking make more difference in the playoffs because everybody's trying to squeeze as many points out? And I tried to do a bunch of stuff. None of it worked. And I want to talk about why none of it worked. And it comes down to data. Every postseason we get, I think it's 13 games, I'm pretty sure. 13 total games for every postseason. So what I had to do was go back several years and say, like, I need, 13 from this past year, 13, 13, 13. And every time you add 13, your data set gets a little bit stronger. But every time you add 13, you have to go further and further back in the past. And unfortunately, trends in the NFL are very, very short-lived, and they change quickly. They change rapidly. So I didn't feel confident reporting on some of the things. And also, nothing, like very, very few things ended up being statistically significant, or even like at a lower bar of statistical significance, even meeting that threshold. So I decided I'm not going to do that, because you fall into this trap that ESPN falls into a lot, and like Fox Sports, like all the sports, is like I want to do a formal analysis on things, and I want it to be robust, and I want it to tell us something meaningful. But when you don't have enough data, there's an inextricable link between effect size and the amount of data you have and statistical significance. And so when you don't have enough data, everything suffers. And what I could do instead is say, well, here's a bunch of like descriptive statistics that, you know, I could do like what freaking Next Gen Stats does and say like, well, who hit the top speed this week? I'm not going to do that. I think that's so silly. And to just like compare like, well, this guy's passer rating is higher than this guy's in the playoffs, so that's why I think they're going to win, is also silly, because there's no meaningful data set or model that's telling us exactly how much that is worth, exactly how much we should weight that in our own heads. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do. So if I can't do that, then I'm not going to do it at all. So yeah, I just wanted to explain why I'm not going to be doing anything on the NFL playoffs. There's just not enough games. I could probably do something cool with like the NBA playoffs or like hockey playoffs or something, because there's just way more data, and there's just like, yeah, you just have a much larger sample size to find things. And the thing is, if you're trying to find things in like a less than 30 sample space, then that better be literally the most meaningful thing possible, because if you have a small effect size, you need much more data to find a significant effect. But if you have a lot of data, then even something with like marginal effect size might be significant, and that's cool. That's what we want to see. But yeah, that was just a little note on that in case you got to the end of the video, which I doubt you did, because we only get like 10 views on our YouTube. But anyways, follow us everywhere. We're also on Blue Sky, for obvious reasons. And so, yeah, follow us everywhere you want to. Okay, see you next week. Bye.